So if you're listening and you feel boxed in by expectations, by your own profession, your education, or the path you were told to follow, this episode is for you. Today's conversation is not about law. It's about how people build their own way, even in rigid systems. So my guest today is Hilary Johns. She is a trial lawyer, a field known for hierarchy, tradition, and this is how it's always done. And yet she built her own path. And so, Hillary, I want to start with something honest. Most professions, especially law, come with an unspoken script. So, from your experience, how early do people start feeling pressure to conform instead of to think for themselves?
I would say that's right away. I think it starts in law school, and I think it's like a lot of professions are working in a company, you're told you're supposed to do things a certain way. Um, it starts very early, and I remember hearing it in law school. I remember hearing it from attorneys already that there was a path you had to follow, and you had to do this thing right, and this thing right, and this thing right. And it's like looking in the 50s and 60s where everybody had a path. Law is steeped in tradition, and it goes back, you know, hundreds of years, at least in this country. And before then we had a British system or whatever it was. But there was a way you did things. You went to the best school you could, you followed all their rules, you got the best jobs you could, and they were very white male dominated, and certain kinds of white men. And not that it's bad to be a white male, I want to be clear. I'm not saying, but it was not, women could not even practice law. I think the first women were like in the 1900s. It's very difficult for anyone who's not Caucasian. And there was a way you did things. And if you were the cream of the crop, you did really well and you get the clients and you get to do these things. Or if you were born into the right family, it was a very traditional way. And a lot of that, fortunately, I think is out the window. I think it's a very new phenomenon. I think every decade it gets a little easier. Every decade it gets a little harder. Um, but as a trial lawyer, I will tell you, I mean, I had a non-traditional career. And when I say non-traditional, I didn't mean I stayed home with the kids for all did that. That's okay. The good choice too. Not saying it isn't. I was a jock. I was a professional athlete. I was more of a beach money type for a while. Um, the top trial lawyers that you're going to see, at least in this country primarily, are not the ones who are following the traditional path. Some of them, the Ivy Leaguers, not usually. A lot of them, because they're different skill sets. So I would say, don't ever make fun of someone who went to night school or an unaccredited school, or you went to school where, or who are you? Because those are some of the best trial lawyers around. It's consistently been shown that these are not, they may not be the professors or the academics or things like that, but it was a hierarchy and it was a system, and you worked within that system, and if you did well it was okay, and the rest of the people got what were called the leftovers. It doesn't really work that way in a lot of, it still does to some degree, but not so much anymore. Law is a business, and a lot of other things go into effect. There are a lot of intangible and soft skills. And speaking well is not just about whether you can recite a case or things like that. There's likability, there's the ability to persuade, there's the ability to understand things, to get along with clients, to cultivate clients, to convey someone's story to a jury. It doesn't matter how smart you are. If people don't like you or can't get along with you or can't relate to you, trial law or anything in business, frankly, is not for you. There's a
Yeah.
rare few who can be in a, well, look at Stacy's journey, which is just amazing. I mean, she doesn't fit traditional mode. I mean, these are very, or you had to do things in a very rigid way. And if you didn't do it that way, you weren't going to have a job, or, you would get stepped on or things like that. The models for businesses have changed too. It used to be there were some solos and some small firms, or no regional firms like ours, and then there were the huge firms. So all of those dynamics have really changed, but you feel it right away. I mean, they're still telling you these things, and we have two law clerks who work here, and they're saying they're telling us in this in law school. I'm like, don't listen to any of that. That's not how it's going to go. And I will
Yeah.
tell you, a lot of law professors, not all of them. Some of them have very little experience and have hardly practiced law at all, so they don't really, they just have been teaching for years. So, people assume, there are a lot of other things that go into that. I do think it's really important in any career you choose, if you can, to have a strong support system, and whether that's family or it's friends or people you meet at work, and if you can, a good mentor, if you can. And maybe that's not in the traditional sense, but you always hear these stories and they really are true, but I just had this, traditionally men, but women too, a mentor who told me and helped me through these things because I'd never encountered them before. If you can have those, I mean, I just had lunch with one of my old bosses. Two of them are good friends of mine. I keep in touch with them. To this day, I use things in our firm that I learned from them when I was young and didn't have what I was doing. And, there was still a lot to learn and I didn't know what I didn't know. And it's still the case. The more you learn, the less you know. But I think that that is very true that, you feel that right away. This is a system and this is what you're going to have to do within it. And, if you don't do that, you're dead. I don't.
Right. So was there like a tension that you felt between who you were and who you were supposed to be?
Yeah, yeah, I think that was very true, but I felt very strongly that I had to choose firms and careers and people I associated with that were more in alignment with who I was as a person. Like when I got my first job, he's like, look, we have a lot of applicants. I like your personality. And that was as important to me as anything because I knew we were going to get on and it wasn't just going to be this very dry, okay, you're billing here and you don't really care about me. It told me that he cared about people as people and he was more
Right.
interested in personalities and things like that, which is crucial. And you're not going to learn that in law school. Most of the things they teach you in law school aren't very useful. They're really more to gear you to pass the bar or whatever the thing is. So people go, okay, I've had this, and I'm like, okay, great. They don't really know
Yeah, it's like
wants
high
me.
school. Like, I mean, half the stuff you learn, you don't, it's like, what are we learning this for? Right? Like, it
Yeah,
comes down to like being able to navigate the real world and to connect with people and to be seen and heard and, be kind. And like you said, if someone doesn't like you, you're not going to make it very far, no matter how smart you are. Right? Like,
no, it's
so
true, or you can't relate to them and things like that too. So being likable and being relatable, and being likable as a lawyer doesn't always mean they're going to want to hang out with you. It doesn't mean they're going to be good friends, but it
yeah,
does mean that, I like this person. I have confidence in them. I think they're relating to me. They're treating me like a person, uh, that they understand or relating to what I went through. They're listening to me. They're not rushing off to the next meeting. They're not treating me like, how much money am I going to make from this? I get calls periodically. I'm like, I don't want to be buying your next car or paying for your retirement, those kinds of things. And I think there is a tendency in the legal profession, unfortunately. I mean, it is a business. And so, you have to evaluate a case and its value and if it has merit and how much it's going to cost. But on the other hand, too, I think people often know if you're evaluating and saying, how much is this going to be? And, what does this mean to me? And there's a balance there. I mean, you can't take on everything that's not going to yield any income because that's not sustainable. But on the other hand, you have to make those decisions in business, but there's a way to do that you're not treating people like they're just a number or a dollar figure too. And I think that's important. And I think it's important in any business. And I think that's why, a lot of companies have brand loyalty. A lot of people have good business. And I've noticed these things. Like I had old bosses, people would call them all the time. They had this constant calls. And the reason we did because they knew these people and they liked them. And they like, this person's gonna do this right and it's going to treat me right. They're going to, if they're not, one of the things we do here, for example, is if it's not something we can help, we try to be a resource. So they say, Hillary, I need someone who can help me with this. And I like, I may know someone, let me make a few phone calls for you. And we do that because they know they can rely on us. And it may not yield anything for us, but knowing that, I think, it's hard to know in business who to trust. And, there's so many people out there and, you know, people are on podcasts, there's influencers, there's billboards, there's ads online, you don't really know. And if in my profession, if someone has a legal problem, they need someone to help them and to help them through the process. And they might not know things and they don't know what happened. Sometimes they need people to listen, and it's not really about, we have cases where it's not so much about the merits of the case, but they need someone to listen to them and understand and help them make sense of it. And there's a system they have to navigate they know nothing about. They're often coming to us with it's contentious, or there's a problem, or they get ripped off, or they want to put a transaction together, and they need someone to help them, and they need someone to simplify that. And
right.
but I think the traditional model and the pushing and things. I mean, if I had to do it over, I was telling a friend of mine a few months ago at lunch, I think I would have done less of what I felt I had to do well, and as opposed to what what I should be doing, as opposed to I think this feels a little more right to do it this way.
Right. I think there's a moment where people have this realization where they think, I can do this, but I don't know if I want to do it forever because it doesn't feel like them. Right. So did you have that realization?
I did. I was working with a firm and I'm like, this, I'm not me. It didn't got to that point, but I was like, this is not really me. And it's working because I'm working hard, but it's not. And I've seen it with lawyers. It's very common. I've seen it in other professions where they're on this life path and it's very difficult to get out of it because they have a mortgage, or they have kids, or they have other responsibilities, or they like to pay. And, but it's not going to go anywhere. I've seen people who have gone through the chute and, 15, 20 years out, they don't have a book of business, they're limited in their job opportunities. And it goes well for a while. It does. And you're getting paid and it's great. But then you look at the bigger term picture and, people are living longer these days. It's very common for people to work into their 80s. And
Right.
before, when I was a kid, I'm 57. That you didn't hear people didn't work that long. I mean, maybe a few, but it was very unusual. And people are, I think kids are born these days can expect to live to be 100 or longer, and that's very becoming much, much more common. So people are living longer, and it's very difficult to be in an environment or doing work that you don't like that long. I can't, I mean, I love being a lawyer, but if I didn't, I would do something else. I mean, because I couldn't do, I mean, trial lawyers work hard. They do. All trial lawyers I've met work hard. If they don't, they're not very good, not good lawyers. Or they're not going to do well. But if you're working that hard for something you really don't like, that's got to be tough. It affects your mental health. It affects your physical health. You probably don't do as well financially because it's hard to do that. I mean, I have some colleagues go, my heart's just not in this. I'm like, you're gonna have a long road there if you are,
Yeah.
because it's
Every day is going to be a struggle.
well,
When you
yeah, it
don't
is.
love what you're
Yeah,
doing, you have no energy, you don't want to be there.
yeah,
Just feels disconnecting, right?
yeah.
So what like making your own way. So it's really inspiring, but it also is a little bit scary. So what does it look like to make your own way in the legal world as a trial lawyer?
Some days I say shit, I don't know. I hope I can say that on the podcast if you added me out. I mean, I think you have to have a little more of an entrepreneurial spirit. A lot of entrepreneurs, are business. I mean, you certainly should make sure you have the skill set and where your client's going to be coming from. And then, yeah, I mean, sometimes you look at it and then I think most business owners look at this go, maybe it should be so much easier just to go be an employee or do these things. I think you really have to want to do that. But I think you also have to look at your future. It's not now, it's where you want to be 10, 15, not even 10 or 15 years from now. It's like, where do you want to be 20 or 30 years from now? And if you're not looking at that, look, you're going to have your ups and downs. You're going to have times where you're like, oh dear God. I mean, it's not smooth sailing. It never is. And particularly in the legal profession, there are times where you're like, you can have weeks or months that are just not fun. I think you have to really you have to hang in. You have to be aware of your business. And, it's not enough to say, oh, I know how to do this. You really have to. I mean, I really believe in being a lawyer. I really believe in the legal system that it can work and but people have to make it work. And I really do believe in my clients. And if I didn't, I think you have to have that belief behind you and that keeps you going. Because if you don't, I mean, there's a real purpose to that. Because I do think there's a real purpose to being a lawyer that a lot of professions don't have. I
Hmm.
think that there really is, the professionals that I've seen who do well are one of them where their job gives them a sense of purpose, whether they're a therapist or a teacher, or even if they work in a bank or something that, I'm helping these people achieve their financial goals. I feel really good about that. You
Right.
have to like there's this purpose here and you're giving them access to the legal system, or maybe you're preventing a legal problem, or maybe they have really been wronged or damaged and you're helping them get something for it. It may not always be what that is, but I think if you approach, I mean, law does allow that for people more than any other country in the world. I don't know if Canada, where you are, has the trial by jury, but we have it here, and it's not always fair. It doesn't always work, but it's when I go into a courtroom, I feel like you're going to get a fair shake here, and I think
Right.
having that feeling is a good feeling and it makes you proud not only to be an American, which it does, but that we have a system like this that allows that. And to be
Right.
able to be a part of that and, help with that. I mean, think of all the people who are in courts these days. When I was a younger attorney, it was really only reserved for maybe the more well-to-do and things like that. Now, fortunately, that's changed where a lot of people have access to the legal system, and there's different ways to get to the legal system. So I think having that is great, and you get to be a part of that system. But I think there's a real purpose with the law, and I think a lot of people are relying on it. And the reality is, trial by jury and those things are kind of the cornerstones of our legal system that keep things fair and in check and things like that. I mean, they do unpredictable things, but life is unpredictable. I mean, it just is.
Yeah. What skills matter most when stepping outside the traditional path? Like what would be some things that came up for you that you wish you knew, or how do you even prepare for this?
Well, I think law is a business. It
Mm.
is. You have to keep that in perspective. I think you have to be realistic about what you want to do. Do you want to be, if you just want to be in an office and do work as it's assigned to you and have people hand you things, then running your own firm or running a firm or being a partner is probably not for you.
Right.
That might be, and some people are perfectly happy. They don't want to have clients. They don't want to do things. I mean, there's a price you pay for that, but it's not for everybody. And I think there are roles like that that can be very satisfying. I think you need to think about it as a business. I think you need to think about it as a lot of relationship building. They can take years and years and years. I had a call from a colleague I've known like 10 or 15 years, maybe longer than that. And he said, Hillary, I know Ian, I didn't talk to him in a long time. I mean, I just, we'd been in touch through cards and things like that. And he sent me over a case, saying, I think you could probably handle this. And, things like that, where, it, you have to approach it that it may not always lead to business.
Right.
I know people like that are just there and like, oh, this isn't going to lead to business. It's not business, blah, blah, blah. And like, I think that's a real turn off to people because it sort of objectifies them in a monetary way. And
Hmm.
it's at least that's how I feel about it. So, you know, I think the humanistic aspect of it needs to be factored in. Um, that a lot of this is about developing a relationship and nothing may come from it, but you need to know that. And I think if you're afraid to get out there and don't want to do those things, um, taking a non-traditional path is probably not for you. Um,
Mm.
there's certainly some risk involved. Some years are great, some years are okay. You do take more of the
Yeah,
risk,
it
but
sounds like you need to be comfortable with uncertainty.
yeah, you do. And again, but it's a continual thing. There's never a time when you have it made. There's never a time. I mean, there's never a time when you're set. There's never a time when, and you can't just put yourself on the thing when you go to Target or the grocery store and it scans your things and it moves your food along or whatever you're buying. You can't just put yourself on. I mean, I don't
Right.
recommend doing that in any situation anyways. It's not a good idea, but you can't
Are you
that's
talking about
not
the
how
conveyor? The conveyor
yeah,
where
the
you put your
conveyor
food on?
belt or
Okay.
whatever it is, that little thing, where you're like everybody's
Beep.
waiting in the line and you put your little bar in between and here's yours and here's mine. And it's okay to do
Yeah.
that. I mean, I'm not saying you shouldn't. I mean, for some people, that's what they want to do. There might be other priorities or they're not as ambitious. Everybody has different ways about them. But I've noticed the attorneys that you really admire and do those things are out doing those things and they want to do
Mm.
those. And you have to be okay with that. And there are different ways to do it. You don't have to, if you don't like bar associations, you don't have to go to all the bar association thing. I mean, there are a lot of non-traditional, a lot of other options these days that didn't exist. Um,
Right.
but you're going to have to go out and kiss a few babies. I mean, you're just going to have to. And if you don't want
Right.
to do it, a colleague says knock on doors, and it is, and introduce yourself. Like I have a colleague in town who and said, "Hey, do you want to have lunch?" And I knew of him, but hadn't really met him. He's a very nice man and a great lawyer. And I refer cases over to him now because he says, I just wanted to meet you, and now we're on a committee together. And now that I know him, people tend to refer to who they go with who they
Yeah.
know. They do. And that's the reality. And, I don't think if he had not, I don't think I ever would have thought to refer to him. And he's a great lawyer, but I just didn't really know him, and that kind of thing. So I think those things do matter. And, having lunches with people, it's also fun. You get to meet some friends and maybe go to a good restaurant. You have to, I like meeting people. I enjoy it. So I'm not one of these people. some days it's taxing, not because you don't like meeting them, but there's just so many things going on. But I like people. So I like going out with people and I like meeting them and I like doing all those things. And so it doesn't bother me. So I'm not, public speaking does not bother me. It's once in a while this crowd. When I was younger, it sort of did, but nothing else. I like people. So, I mean, sure, some days I like being by myself, but I like people. I like meeting them. I'm always willing to make a new friend. So I think, I like me. I'm aware that not everybody's a good person, but there are a lot of good people in the world too. And I think, yeah, I think that's also important too. I mean, I meet a lot of lawyers who don't really like people that much or don't like their
Right.
clients much. And it's like, well, you kind of got to empathize with what this, and again, I've had some tough clients, to be sure, that I do not want to associate with. But by and large, these are people who have real problems who need your help.
Yeah, and I feel like trust and integrity are two things that play an important role, right? Like if you don't have the trust and the
Yeah.
integrity in a relationship in any profession, I
Yeah.
don't see it being that successful. One thing that I see across professions is this. So incredibly capable people who don't trust their own decisions. Why do you think that happens, especially among high achievers?
Well, I think high achieving, you can be high achieving in a certain thing, but maybe you're not confident in another area. I think maybe you're raised in an environment that was not supportive. They could be in
Right,
an abusive relationship, or they're around negative people. I found it doesn't matter how good you are if you're in a toxic environment. It's
right,
going to be extremely difficult to do well. And you're going to be lucky if anybody even notices you're good. So,
right,
you could be an absolute star, and be in a bad environment where they put you down and they do all these things. So it's not going to look that way. So
right.
I think people get frustrated. I think people get into life situations where they don't want to take a risk. And I think there's, and they have a lot of therapies and groups and tapping and all these things too for people, these uh, inappropriately held beliefs that they can't do better for themselves because maybe it makes me a target, maybe people won't like me, maybe I'll get criticized. I think there's a lot of those facts that go into it. They could be in an environment, they could be for illegal reasons. Maybe it's a person of color, that's in an environment where they might get, they're afraid they're going to get trashed. I have handled cases. We do employer defense where other staff gets mad where someone gets a raise or a promotion because they're jealous or whatever it is, and they're worried about being retaliated against. There could be a lot of reasons, and that can be very damaging to your sense of your willingness to go again or to keep doing those things and kind of stuff like that too. So I think that, I mean, who knows, it can be psychological too. There could be a mental block for whatever reason, but there are ways to get around that too, fortunately. So I think there can be all those kinds of factors that go into it.
Yeah. It sounds like confidence essentially follows decisions. So it's not the other way around, right? Like you need to start doing the things in order to feel that confidence. You don't start with confidence, right? So it's like taking those risks I mean, it's so important to have a good team around you, cheering you on, good mentors and being seen and heard.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
agree. I
definitely.
agree. Yeah, and I think step by step you build a track record. It really is step by step, so it's not. We've all heard, and this is, very common these days. People have done nothing with their lives and are giving advice, and they know everything. And you come across,
Oh, totally.
you can come across as a blowhard, or you don't really know what you're talking about. And some of these people can be extremely convincing. I mean, the way they talk, you think, God, they know everything, but they don't.
Yes,
I,
and there's so
I,
much of that now with influencers and all these products, and you don't know who to believe because they're so good at what they're saying, and
yeah.
they look a certain way, and you're like, okay, I believe everything you're saying. But then you look at their credentials and they have none of it. So it's,
What would you
guess you just have to
possibly
do your
know, about
due
anything?
diligence. Yeah,
Yeah,
for
no, I know
sure.
it's true. It's a very common. It's actually a punchline in a lot of these movies and things like that. But it's more common these days. I think that's what I've observed. That's just my opinion. But I mean, I think you need to just really, look, it really is true to some degree. You have to be yourself. It's just that there's a polished version of yourself. That it's we've all heard the stories about people who just fake it till you make it, and or present something a facade of themselves. And if you do that for too long, you sort of become something you're not, or living a
Right.
lie. You're gonna. It's not that you can't still be successful. You can. Plenty of people do it. It makes it a lot harder.
Yeah.
There's some people you see, and what I've learned, it's like it seems so much easier for them. Is it with it, or did it just seem that way? But I think people don't have as much difficulty or can have more success and are able to handle it, probably embrace themselves, in a certain way that other people don't.
Yeah. So people often think they need a perfect plan before they move. In your experience, what do people actually need in order to take the first step?
Well, motivation, a willingness to do it, some
Right.
kind of idea. I think a very strong, realistic belief in themselves. Um,
Right.
I've never heard of anybody. I used to think that everything had to go perfectly well in this and appearances were. I've never met or dealt with a firm that doesn't have its fair share of issues or business person. Everybody does. That's just not true. It is. I don't. Anybody who's telling that is lying. Life. You deal with some things in life. That's just how it goes. And the
Right.
higher the stakes and things like that, or the more of them you do, the more you're going to have issues with that. So I'm always wary of someone who comes across as perfect. Well presented and polished is one thing, but anything other than that, I think you have to. I think there was for years and years and years there was a belief that you had to present a certain way and be a certain way. If you weren't like that, you weren't going to make it. And I think people are much more willing. That's why people are so eager to see. People will tell a story, or maybe they had a bad divorce, or maybe they made some bad business decisions, or maybe they were broke for a while, or they learned these things. And I think people relate to them, not just because they say, "Oh, good, it's not just me," but I think they say, this person's being candid. They've had a real life, whereas opposed to, "Oh, I never have any problems and everything's perfect, and I look great all the time," and it's like I don't think it's someone else's fault if things don't go well. I think and again, there's a lot of pressure and a lot of things to present that way, but life just doesn't go that. It just doesn't. I don't know anybody. The more realistic, oh, shoot, I got a flat tire today, or there's this going on this morning, or I had 15 phone calls and I can't possibly field all these calls. I mean, does anybody think you can field 15 phone calls in the morning, give meaningful responses, and get your work done? You can't. I know because I've
Right.
tried. It's just not. So it's there's always something that comes up, or someone who's not happy, or it just doesn't work that way. But I think you know I see both sides of it. But if you're going to venture out on your own and have your own business, I think you need to know this thing. I think you really need to think things through so you feel comfortable and you have an emotional backup too. I found this very important, and that's, to me, is very different from having a support system. It's a different kind of support system. So you're your own support system in a way. So if someone says, no, you can't do this, no, I understand about licensing, that's not true. Or, what are you going to do when someone says this? So you're going to have those emotional backup. You can be your emotional backup for yourself. And, whether that's based on your experiences or whatever it is, you know more how to handle situations because they will come up, whatever it is.
Right. Yeah. So I think let's help the people who are listening and thinking that they want to build their own way, but they don't know where to start. So, what are some grounding steps that someone could take in the next 30 to 60 days that would help them?
Um, Excuse me. I think, excuse me, first and foremost, I think you need to figure out what you want to do. So, what skill sets are you going to be using, and what's the market for? So, essentially, what are you selling?
Right.
So, selling, and so the name of our firm, even though we have several lawyers here, is Hillary John's Trial Lawyer, trial lawyer, because that's what we do. There's a need for people who actually try cases on both coasts and can take a case to trial in certain areas and have a strong track record. So they know exactly what they do when they read it. So what are your skill sets? What are you going to be selling? Well, I'm just going to go out and do work. Okay, you need to think very seriously about what are you selling? Look, in any market, unless you've created some new formula for something, there's going to be other people in your market. That's just how. What are you selling? What exactly? What are your skill sets within that? Realistically, don't make yourself feel that to say, look, if you've not done this, or it's something you can learn. In law, it's do you have that skill set, or do you have the ability to learn it? That's the standard. So if you read up on something, could you figure it out and be confident? Um, who would your clients be? Who would your customer, what's your customer base? Okay. Does it pay well enough for you to make a living? And are you going to have to do something else in an interim period to do it? So, for example, maybe you want to get into a new market of selling a particular gadget and you've got a great idea to produce it, but you're not going to quit your day job just yet. Maybe that's something you're going to do on the side. And how are you going to do that? If it works, how well would it pay you? I mean, what are you going to be earning here? What is the payout? I mean, I see a lot of people in business making the mistake thinking, I love what I'm doing. Okay, but if you can't pay for your health insurance and you can't pay your mortgage or your rent or whatever it is, you may have a problem here. Do you want kids? I mean, again, I understand there are hurdles, but you need to be realistic about that. I mean, an advantage for obviously in the legal profession is, we bill at an hourly rate and get paid that. But, how much is it going to cost to start? It's
Right.
fortunate in this day and age. You can do a lot of things remotely. It's not India, but there's insurance and if you need licensing and, things like that. We file tax returns in 2 states. I mean, it's, things like that that you need to be aware of and say, okay, I'm going to be able to do these things. And so big picture, what is this going to look like? Is there a market for it? I mean, where you reside, is there a market for it? So, I reside in LA and I do a lot of work in New York, so my second home. So those are huge markets. So there's a lot of business there. But, if you're in a smaller area, what exactly does that mean to you? What are you realistically looking at? I don't think it's advisable in certain areas to compare yourself to another company because the results can be very skewed. Like, for example, in lawyers make vastly different amounts, depending on where they work and what they do. But I think you need to get a handle on those. And also, are you gonna be able to be okay with, are you gonna be able to ride this out? Do you understand what you may have in store for you? And it doesn't mean it's a bad thing. It just means there are going to be days you're going to okay this. And when are you going to take the training? Are you going to have a training wheel period? Or are you going to take the training? When are you going to take the training wheels off the bike? Because it's not going to work if you never take the training wheels off. It's just not. And I think the other issue is what's your backup plan? If it doesn't work out, I don't like to start any kind of venture relationship thinking if it doesn't work out, but I do. If this doesn't work out, what are we looking at here? And how does that work? And I think you need to do that because you need to have the whole picture and understand that if you're going to, it's going to work, it's going to work, and you're not willing to consider other options, you're not helping yourself.
Right.
And
Yeah,
it's
it sounds like clarifying what no longer fits and what fits is so important. Getting really clear on what you're building and then building your skills instead of, waiting for certainty, having a backup plan, empowering yourself so you're not overwhelmed with everything in a sense.
I think so. And I think, no one's going to give you anything in business. If they do, it's probably something in it for them. Businesses,
Right.
you eat what you kill, really. I mean, so it's, there are different ways of doing that, but you eat what you kill. You really do. And, if you're providing that value and things like that. So I think you need to think, and I think your tolerance for risk, you need to think about that too. There are a lot of people who don't want to take that kind of risk. So maybe they, yeah, I probably would be making more money if I were on my own, but or I had my own group, but I don't want to do that. I don't want to. Um, I know some outstanding lawyers who are named partners and things like that. They go, I have someone else deal with that lawyer. I don't want to do that anymore. Yeah, I don't want to deal with all that business aspect. And they're great lawyers. So that I can just speak to my profession, but I know,
Hmm.
I want to be doing this. I don't want to have a resume in my hand when I'm 80. And I know there's some ups and downs, but I want to be doing this. I work my way up and I'm proud of what I've made and I like this. You know,
Yeah. So, Hillary, if you could redefine success for someone who feels boxed in right now, how would you define success?
I would say open the box and look in. I know exactly what you mean by feeling in a box, and I've felt that way before. I mean, I think if you're in a box to some degree, you're playing someone else's game, but it may work for you. So I think you don't need to feel bad if it's not for you. But I think you really need to y- stand over the box and open it. You're not really in the box. That's what I would say. I mean, you're only in the box because you put yourself in the box or you feel that way. Don't, and I think it really is true. You need to start where you are. So it may be a step-by-step process. It may not happen in 4 to 6 months. It may happen in 2 or 3 years. And I think you can work towards that. I would say you can't, it's good to want things, but don't ever be afraid to lose it. If you're afraid to lose, you're not going to be, it's not going to work. I mean, there's healthy concern, and then there's being so worried about losing that you're not willing to take those steps. But I think you have to be also know how you are, um, and be realistic about what your personality is and where you are in your life. I mean, there are certain periods of time it is just not a good time to be doing that. Something.
Mm,
It just isn't.
right.
It can be politically, socially, financial, emotional, medical, it could be lots of different things. And I think you need to be realistic. Is this the right time for you? Or is there, and then you have to say, is there ever a good time? Because I hear a lot of people making this mistake. Oh, someday we're going to do this. Someday it's not going to come unless you make it happen. And I know people like that, and they have a lot of unrealized ambition that gets very frustrated later, but they could be okay with it because they made other decisions. But if you're really want to do that, but I also, it's good to take advice, but I think also everybody is different. Everybody is different. And so I think just because you or I make a certain decision, right? Oh God, you go, God, Hillary, why are you doing that? Or it might be the right choice for me, but it's not the right choice for Lisa, right? Vice versa. So I think you have to really think seriously about that, whether or not this is the right choice for you. And again, I'm not saying to leave a high paying job and take up gardening and hope that you get a few clients and you're going to be making as much money because that might not be a good business model. But, I've heard of plenty of people who think, I'm just going to go into this and I know a lot of people. And again, just because someone's cheering you on does not mean that they don't have your best interest at heart, but they may not have thought things through for you. Ultimately, it has to be your decision. Or if you make a decision with your spouse or your friend or something like that. But I think ultimately people may mean well when they give advice, but they're not you. And so
Absolutely.
yeah, you really have to think. But if you're having other personal issues or things like that, hoping this is going to solve your problems, it's not. Okay, so those though, if you have other issues, it's kind of like saying if you get married, it's going to fix a problem you have. It's not. Starting your own
Yeah,
business is not going to do this either. Having kids, if you have problems, it's not going to make that go away. It may be great
right.
to have kids, so pets as I have, but that I think you need it's not a cure-all. It's something you just have to really want to do. But if you really want to do it and you're willing to put in the work, that's what's great about this country is you can do that. And there are
Right.
opportunities. But you have to be realistic about your market. Is that going to require you to move? Are you going to be required to live in a certain area longer than you want to? And know your markets or study and learn. You can learn a lot about those things. That's what I would say.
Yeah. Amazing. Thank you so much for being here today and for
Oh,
covering this amazing topic.
you're so welcome. Thank you for meeting with me. I'm glad we were able to do this.
Yeah, me too. And if you're listening and you've been quietly wondering if there is another way, um, there is. You're not stuck. Sometimes we're evolving. So this is your permission slip. You don't have to burn everything down. You don't have to follow someone else's blueprint. And you're not wrong for wanting more alignment. So, Hillary, thank you for showing that it's possible to build your own way, even in structured systems. And for those who want to learn more about Hillary's work, we will link everything in the show notes for you. So, again, you guys, you're not lost, you're evolving. Stay tuned for the next episode coming soon. Thanks, everyone. Take care.